Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com, and we're here today with episode number 17 in our incredible new tutorial series where you're learning how to make Arduino and Python work together. What I'm going to need you to do is pour yourself a nice tall glass of iced coffee. That would be straight up black coffee poured over ice, no sugar, no sweeteners, none needed. And as you're pouring your coffee, as always, I want to give a shout out to you guys who are helping me out over at Patreon. It is your support and your encouragement that keeps this great content coming. You guys that are not helping out yet, take a look down in the description. There is a link over to my Patreon account. Think about hopping on over there and hooking a brother up. But enough of this shameless self-promotion. Let's talk about what I am going to teach you today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you my solution to the homework assignment that I gave you in episode number 16. Now, if you remember in our earlier episodes, like episodes 14 and 15, we developed a Visual Python, VPython 3D model of a room. The room had a marble and the marble was bouncing around in the room. Then in episode number 16, what we did is we came in and we connected a joystick up to the Arduino, and then we had the Arduino reading data, position data from the joystick. Your homework assignment for today was to pass that data coming from the joystick in Arduino over to Python, read it in, and then in the simulation create a paddle and have the position of the paddle controlled smoothly by the joystick. How many of you were successful? If you were successful, leave a comment down below. I am legend. If you were not successful, leave a comment down below. I folded up like a cheap Walmart lawn chair. Okay, it's okay to fold up like a lawn chair. We all do that, but you got to try and fail. And then when you try and fail a lot, it really feels good when you try and get it right. But enough of this introductory banter. Let's jump in and let's see if we can get caught up. I'm going to take a couple minutes, make sure that you're starting out exactly where the same place that I am starting out. And so what I will need you to do is go ahead and let's make sure that you've got the same code in your Arduino as I have in mine. And so what you can do is you can go to the most excellent www.toptechboy.com, and I better get out of your way, and I better get further out of your way there. And then you can come over here, and in this happy little search bar, you can search on using an Arduino with Python lesson 16, something about a joystick, and that should get you there. And then here I have the code that we finished off with in episode number 16. So let's make sure you have that. You can copy that, go put it in your Arduino IDE, download that into your Arduino. And then over on the Python side, this is what we ended up with in episode number 15. And so let's snag this code. Okay, and now we're going to go on over to the most excellent Visual Studio Code, and I remind you that we are working in the PyArduino folder, and I need to erase this. Okay, yes. Okay, and now we're going to come over and we're going to create a new program called passdata-12.py, and remember the .py is kind of important. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to paste that code that we just copied. And now if we run this, if the universe is in proper operating order, we should have a 3D graphics pop up with a room with the marble bouncing around in it. Let's see if that works. Boom. Okay, there is our simulation, and the marble is bouncing around properly. So we have just demonstrated that we are able to copy and paste, but let's see if we can take this a little bit further. Let's go ahead and see if we can pull that data in. Over on the Arduino side, we ran this program. Let me just pop that up to remind you that we are over here on the Arduino side. Okay, on the Arduino side, we have this code. And if I look at the data here in the serial monitor, you can see now, remember that to keep our orientation straight, we've got to keep the joystick oriented in the same way. And I have the wires coming out to the left. The first number being printed is X and the second number being printed is Y. When the stick is to the left, the potentiometer reads 0. When the stick is to the right, it reads 1023. That's what we need to know. Now, what we need to do is we need to go in and we need to really get this working on paper. What you've got to do is you've got to go in, you've got to sketch it out. And if we get it working on paper, then it's going to be really easy to get it working in the code, to get it working on the program. But the biggest mistake that I see when I'm teaching people in real life is they jump in and start trying to code before they really have the math done, before they really have the strategy done. And so let's take a second and let's see if we can get our strategy straight, and then when it comes time to coding, it should be easy. So we need to switch over here to the most excellent sketchpad, and we need to think, what? When I have the potentiometer to the left, I want my paddle to be to the left. When I have my potentiometer to the right, I want my paddle to be to the right. And so let's think about this a little bit. So when the potentiometer here would be the potentiometer is on the left, here the potentiometer is on the right. When the potentiometer is on the left, it reads what? 0. And when the potentiometer is on the right, it reads 1023. Okay, well now what do I want to do when the potentiometer is to the left? I want the paddle to be all the way to the left side of the room. And so let's hop back over here, and I just want to make sure, it might have been a week since you guys looked at this. I want to make sure that you haven't forgotten that we have set the dimension of the room to room X. And the center, I guess I should draw that. Let me just sketch this up. If you remember, if this is the room, okay, the center of the room is the position 0, 0, and therefore the left edge of the room would be the position minus room X divided by 2. In the position of the right side of the room, the right wall would be positive, excuse me, positive room X over 2. Okay, so if the potentiometer is to the left, where do we want the paddle? We want it at minus room X divided by 2. If the potentiometer is all the way to the right, then we want this to be positive room X. Let me clean that up. I got a little careless there. I put that in parentheses before I should. Okay, so then if we're potentiometer all the way to the right, we want the paddle to be positive room X divided by 2. All right, and we want to move the paddle smoothly between those 2 points. What do we need? We need a line. We need the equation of that line. And remember, the first thing to do a line is the slope. And how do we find the slope? Well, the slope is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So what would this be? What is y2? There is y2. y2 is room x divided by 2, and then minus y1. y1 is over here, and that is a minus I'm having a little trouble here. So it's a minus, and then the value itself is a minus, so we have 2 minuses, room x divided by 2 over x2 is what? x2 is 1023. 1023 minus 0. Okay, now a minus becomes a plus, so this would be room x over 2 plus room x over 2. That is just going to be equal to what? room X, because I've got like half a room X plus half a room X, that's 1 room X over 1023. Ladies and gentlemen, we have our slope. Okay, now we've got to get the equation of the line. Y minus Y1 is equal to M onto X minus X1. So we have Y minus Y1. What is Y1? It is over here. And so that is going to be minus room X divided by 2 is equal to M, which is here, room X divided by 1023 onto X minus X1, which is 0. So we just have this like this. Now all we have to do is we have to subtract room X over 2 from both sides, because what you really see is minus a minus is a plus, so this is Y, and I'll just make it that Y plus room X over 2. Now I have to subtract room X over 2 from both sides, so Y is going to be equal to room X divided by 1023 times X, and then minus room X over 2. And what this will allow us to do is this will allow us to take the pot value in X, and turn it into a paddle position, the position of the paddle. So we're going to take the potentiometer value and we're going to turn it into the paddle position. Does that make sense? I hope so. So let's jump over here and let's do a little coding, and let's see if we can start getting this working. So we'll come back over to our code view, and the first thing we need to do is that data that is sitting over there. I better make sure I didn't leave my serial monitor open, or that's going to cause me some grief. Yep, and in fact I did. So let's make sure that we close this. All right, now we want to read that data that Arduino is spitting out to the COM port. We want to read that now on the Python side. And so we're going to have to do a little bit of work here. The first thing that we are going to need to do is, if we're going to read something from the serial port, we're going to need to import serial like that. And now we've got to create our serial data object to read from, and I'm just going to call it Arduino data. You can call it kitty litter box if you want to, but I think Arduino data is a little more descriptive. It's serial lowercase dot serial uppercase s. And then for me, I'm operating on COM3, but you need to go check and see what COM port your Arduino is on. I'm on COM3, and we should all be at 115/200 for the baud rate. So now we've got a place that we can read the data from. Okay, we can read the data. Now what we'll want to do down here in this while loop is we'll want to read the data. Now because we're waiting and grabbing data, that's going to slow this whole thing up. So I think that probably we don't need a rate statement anymore. The rate is just to keep it from running crazy fast. The reads will be slowing it down enough, I think. Okay, so first thing we want to do is we want to wait for there to be data. So I'll say while serial or while Arduino data dot in waiting, W is uppercase there, be careful, in waiting open close, while that's equal 0. What does that mean? While there is no data, what do we want to do while there is no data? We want to do absolutely nothing, so we're just going to pass. Okay, now once there is data, it will drop out of that and we want to read it. So we're going to get our data packet, and that's going to be Arduino data. And then how do we get the data? We read line, open close like that. Okay, so at this point we should have our data, and let's just print it right here just to make sure it's working. And so I'm going to print the data is, and then colon space, and then I will just put a comma and data packet. So let's just make sure that we can read the data. How does that sound? We're going to run this. And this down in the bottom, we should start seeing, well, we'll see the simulation open. It's still bouncing around, so that's good. We'll close that and look at that. We are getting data, and it looks like an X value, a Y value, and then if the switch is switched or not. And so if I go left, I go 0 to 1023, everything is right, and it looks really good as far as that equation that we came up with. All right, so now I think that I need to just bust this data packet up and turn it into data that we can actually work with. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that data packet is going to be equal to the string value of data packet. Let's see. I think, okay, what I need to do is I need to strip off that, I need to strip off all that nonsense, the B with the apostrophe, and then the /r/n, if you remember that. Let me just run that just to show you that again. I kind of jumped over that. Okay, so you see when we're reading the data, it's good that the data is there, but we've got that B apostrophe we don't want, and we've got the /r/n that we don't want. And so we need to strip that off. So I'm going to say that data packet is equal to, I've got to encode it. We've done this before, so you remember this stuff. If you don't, go back and watch it. We've got to take the data packet and we have to encode it in order to be able to work with it. So it's going to be a UTF -8 like that. There's several ways to do this. I think you can also do like a dot encode, but we're going to do it this way. So now we've turned it into a real string. We've turned the data packet into a real string, and now we've got to strip that /r/n and that other stuff off. So I'm going to say data packet dot strip, and then what I'm going to strip the /r/n, and make sure that you do that in the right right direction on the slash. It's the one that is above the enter. It's the one that is above the enter. Okay, now I want to split it, so now I'm going to say split packet is equal to data packet and then dot split. And then what do I want to split it on? I want to split it on the comma, because remember it was like the X value, comma, Y value, comma, Z value, and I want to split it on the comma. All right, so this changes it from a byte format to a string that we can work with. Then this takes off the /r/n, and then this splits it, that X, comma, Y, comma, Z string, into an array whose first element is going to be X, whose second element is going to be Y, and whose third element is going to be Z. And they're still strings, so let's take care of that. X, the value, the number, then is going to be float of split packet and the 0th element. All right. And then this is going to be easier just to copy and paste. And so the first value is the X value, the next value is the Y value, the next value is the Z value, okay, and then it's going to be the 0th element, the first element, and the second element. And I probably should have just copied and pasted this because we've done it so many times, but I did just type it out for you. It's good to kind of review what is going on here. All right, so now we have got the data. Okay, now we have got the data. One thing we should do is we should go in now and we should create the paddle. Okay, and I'm going to do that up top here. We've created the marble. After we create the marble, let's create the paddle. But I think before I create the paddle, we need to go ahead and give it some parameters. So I'm going to say that the paddle X, and this is not, or let's just say paddle X is going to be the width in X of the paddle, and let's just make that 2, and then paddle Y, that's going to be the height of the paddle. Let's make that 2, and then let's go ahead and say paddle Z, that's like how deep the paddle is. Let's just make that, let's say 0.2, okay? And now we need a paddle opacity, that's like how solid or how transparent. Let's make it almost solid, but let's have it where you can see through it a little bit. So 1 is solid, 0 is transparent, 0.8 is almost solid. And now let's do a paddle color, and let's make it sort of an aqua. So paddle color is going to be a vector, and we'll make the red value 0. We'll make the G value, let's make it like 0.8. The G value is 0.8, and RGB, let's make the blue value 0.6, and I am missing a comma like that. Okay, does that make sense? We have our parameters set up for the paddle. Now we can create the paddle. So the paddle is going to be equal to a box, and that box is going to have a size, and the size is going to be equal to a vector, and that vector is going to be, what's the X size? Well, it's paddle X, we set that up, paddle Y, we set that up, paddle Z, we set that up. So that was all pretty easy on the size. Now we have to think of the position. The position, let's start it in the center of the room. Now we're on that front face, but let's start it in the center of the front face. So the position is going to be vector. The position is going to be vector, and then in X it's going to be in the center. Am I right? Yeah. It's going to be in the center in X. It's going to be the center in Y, but Z needs to be in that front face. And so we've got to bring it to that front wall, which is going to be positive room Z in the Z direction divided by 2. Remember, the origin is in the center of the room. The origin is the center of the room. And so we've got to come out half the Z dimension of the room to end up at that front face. Does that make sense? I hope it does. And we're getting really close here. We have the size, we have the position. Let's give it a color. Color is going to be equal to paddle color, which we set up already, and then opacity is going to be equal to paddle opacity. So that's all the ugliness in one line of code, and now anything we want to adjust, we should just be able to adjust it up here in the parameter. Let's go ahead and run this just to make sure the thing is running and we haven't generated any errors. The paddle's not going to be moving, but at least we should see it, I think, if I'm thinking about this right. Okay. So look at that, the paddle. Yeah, there's the paddle. Okay, there's the paddle, and the ball is just bouncing around. Don't worry about the ball right now. All we're trying to do is make a paddle. Now what do we want to do? We want to move the paddle. Well, how do we know? We don't know how to move it up and down yet. We haven't done that math, but we should be able to move it left and right, because we have an equation. And with that equation, we should be able to move this thing to the left and the right. And I'm just going to call up that equation again to make sure. You guys hopefully wrote it down, and if you wrote it down, you can just do this as you're looking at that. Well, what do I need now? I need to have an X position of the paddle, okay? And so what I need to do here is, and this will be down here, I need a X position of the paddle. Well, I've read the X value from the potentiometer, the Y value from the potentiometer, and Z is whether the button has been clicked or not. But I want that X value, and I want to turn it into a paddle position, pad X. Okay, pad X is the X position of the paddle. And what is that going to be? Look at the equation that we just made. It's room X divided by 1023, and I'm going to make that a point, just to make sure, 1023 point, decimal point, and what that guarantees is that it should be an integer. I don't like how that looks. Why is that doing that? I don't like it, but I'm just going to go with it anyway, and then we'll see what happens. Pad x is 1023 divided by x, and I'm going to put parentheses around that just to kind of always force our order of operations. 1023 divided by x. Okay, now what I am going to do is put in the equation times x. Okay, and what is x? Well, x we read here, that's that x value off of the potentiometer, right? And then what did we do? We subtracted from that room x divided by 2. And just as a reminder, that was this equation here that we derived over there. Does that make sense? Okay, now we have the x position that we want the paddle in. Now, as we're updating the marble position, we also need to update the paddle position. We're going to update the paddle position. It'd be nice if you could see that. Okay, so after we update the marble position, which that code is already there, now we're going to update the paddle dot position, and that's going to be vector, and that position is going to now be, I called that pad x in the x direction. Right now it's going to stay at 0 because we're just moving it back and forth. And then remember, it came out a positive room z divided by 2, so the paddle is at the front of the room. This is frightening. This is frightening. Didn't crash. Didn't crash. Okay, do I dare pick up the joystick? Do I dare pick up the joystick? Boom! Did you see that? Look at that. All right, look at that. Okay, we're going to come over, and it is okay. I'm just aligning. The main thing is that you're mapping out the whole room. Okay, the main thing is you're mapping out the whole room, and if you don't want it to go a little outside the room, just don't move it all the way over there. But do you see how I am? Left is left, right is right, and that is working beautifully. That is working beautifully. Okay, what do we want now? We want to be able to move it up and down now. We want to be able to move it up and down. So let's go do that. Man, we are getting really, really close. So let's kill this. And now do I just jump in and start coding? No, we got to get it working on paper first. So we're going to come back over here, but I do think there's one other quick thing we want to make sure, and that is what direction the joystick is working in the Y. And so that way, that's going to be really important to make sure that we're going in the right direction. So we're going to come all the way back over to Arduino. And then we're going to look at our serial monitor. And remember, we're keeping the leads, the wires to the left. When I go forward, the forward is 0 and all the way back is 1023. So forward is 0. Remember that. And now we are going to come over here. And we said that forward was 0. And I think I am just going to clear this whole thing out. And so what we said was, we said the forward position is 0, and then the back position is 1023. All right, the back position is 1023. Well, when the joystick is forward, what do we want? When the joystick is forward, we want the paddle to be at the top of the room. Okay, and the top of the room would be positive room Y divided by 2. Because remember, this is the origin. This dimension is room Y. And so if I want to be at the top, that would be room, this position here would be half the room Y, which would be room Y divided by 2, and down here would be minus room Y divided by 2. Okay, does that make sense? So at 0, I want to be at room y divided by 2. When the potentiometer reads 1023, I want to be at minus room y divided by 2. Okay, let's do our slope. M is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, what is y2? y2 is minus room y over 2. Okay, and then minus y1, what is y1? It's minus room y over 2. Because this is positive, I'm subtracting, so I have minus room y over 2 minus room y over 2 divided by what? x2. x2 is 1023. 1023 minus x1, which is 0. So what does this come out to? Well, in the denominator, I have 1023 and minus half of room y minus another half of room y is just what? Minus room y. So I have a slope. Now, what is the equation of the line? Y minus y1 is equal to m onto x minus x1. Y minus, what is y1? y1 is up here, so that's minus room y over 2, and then that's equal to the slope. What is the slope? Minus room y over 1023 times x minus x1. Well, what is x1? x1 is up here at 0, so it just becomes like that. Now all I've got to do is just move that room y over 2 to the other side. So y is equal to minus room y divided by 1023 times x plus, because I'm adding room y over 2 to both sides, room y over 2. Man, if there's nothing else you learn from me in our time together, is if you learn how to use a line, the equation of a line, to make these things simple and accurate instead of doing it by trial and error, or instead of using these crazy ratio schemes and gut intuition math, just do the math. Okay, now all we got to do is go program that for the y pad position, and we should just about be there. Okay, we should just about be there. So let me come back to this other view here, this other view. Okay, and now what we are going to do is we're going to come back to our Visual Studio view, and then remember how we calculated the pad X? Well, now I just need to calculate the pad, take my cap blocks off, my pad Y. That's the Y position of the paddle, and that was what? That was this time minus room Y divided by 1023. Okay. And now, instead of x, we're going up and down. We multiply it by this one, okay, because we're working along the y-axis. So we're going to multiply it by y, because that is just saying that's the value coming from the y potentiometer. We multiply it by y. And then what do? We are going to add room y divided by 2. And that is just that equation that we just came up with. And you couldn't see that, and that is really bad. Okay, so do you see that? Minus room y divided by 1023, and I will, for good measure, make that a floating point just to be sure. Okay, now we've got to come down and we've got to apply that value here. So instead of just applying pad X, we also need to apply pad Y, which is the Y position of the paddle. And right, we're not coming in and out. We are just moving left and right and up and down. And it doesn't recognize pad Y, and why is that? Lowercase p. This is really getting scary. Okay, are we really going to try to run this? Are we really going to try to run this? Okay, so let's come over here. Let's get our joystick ready. Let's run it. Comes to life. It's kind of good that the ball keeps bouncing because that is an indication that we haven't crashed the program. And so now let's see. Moving to the left, moving to the right, and now we're going to go up. Boom. What really makes me happy is because we did the math, you know, up is up. And if you just try to kind of guess, it could actually be going the wrong way, and down is down. And now let's see, can we get it to the corner? Yep, we can get it to the corners. And then we can get it to that corner, and we can get it to this corner. And so you see, I can move this thing around. Okay, I can move this thing around. So you guys tell me where this is going. Tell me where this is going. You guys leave a comment down below and tell me what your homework assignment is for next week. What is your homework assignment? Your homework assignment is to make this kind of like a 3D version of the Pong game, okay? And so we're not going to just give you a freebie, right? If that marble just hits that glass front, that's not enough. The glass front goes away. The marble has to hit your paddle. And if the marble doesn't hit your paddle, it's going to come out of the room jailbreak and you're going to lose a point. So this is going to be sort of like a 3D version of the old Pong game, and you have to use this paddle to keep the ball in the room. And let's see how hard it is. You see, that actually is going to be, I think, harder than I think it's going to be. Okay, so you see you got to come up here and you got to make sure that it bounces off like that. So what you've got to do is now you've got to turn this into a game. All right. Guys, how many times, a lot of you have taken a lot of my lessons, and how many times have we found that we can solve our problem by using the equation of a line? How many of you have actually learned how to use a line, and how many of you on your own see situations now that come up where really what you see as the solution is to use a line? Now, a lot of you guys, what you're always telling me is you're telling me something like, oh, well, it's a ratio. It's 5/1023 would be the same as this, and you just do this, and you just do it with a ratio. Man, ratios don't work when the y-intercept is not 0. And so you're going to go through life about a third of the time doing something completely wrong because you're using ratios that don't work when your y-intercept is not 0. But you kind of have this vague memory of something and you apply it to all problems. The way I showed you how to do it, calculating, coming up with the 2 points, calculating the slope, calculating the equation of the line, it will always work for any linear equation. And man, I just hope that you guys will learn that. All right. I do hope that you guys are enjoying taking these lessons as much as I'm enjoying making them. If you're enjoying them, give them a thumbs up. Also, leave a comment down below. Leave a comment, because comments and thumbs up help us to get this in front of more people. When we do that, YouTube is more likely to show it to new people. And that's really important because we need more people doing engineering and writing code, and fewer people sitting around watching silly cat videos. Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com. I will talk to you guys later.